Okay. Part 9. The Summoned Merchants. One morning, several days later, Fran noticed that the blizzard had weakened considerably. He set aside the boxes he had prepared for Ferdinand and picked up a book instead. Lady Rosamine, shall we head to the Orphanage Director's chambers? You can read while we wait for the others to arrive. And so we departed, leaving it to Zom to contact Ferdinand. We came across Gil on the way, who was coming to tell us that the Plantain and Gilberta companies would soon be arriving. I started reading the very moment we reached my chambers, which had been warmed ahead of time such that we were ready whenever Benno and the others got there. Fran called out a short while later. They have arrived, Lady Rosamine. I closed my book and immediately saw a large crowd coming up the stairs. Benno, Mark, and Lutz from the Plantain Company, Otto, Theo, and Leon from the Gilberta Company, and Gustav with 2 assistants from the Merchants Guild. We are honored beyond words to have a moment of your time, Gustav said, serving as the large group's representative. He was rigid with anxiety, as expected of someone presented with a great task that had to succeed under any circumstances. I glanced over at everyone I had gathered, then gestured for them to take their seats. Lady Rosamine, I'd like to humbly request a more detailed explanation of what you discussed in your letter, Benno said, having apparently been entrusted with taking the lead. This makes sense, since I was closer to him than the other adults. Given that Gustav and his assistants were here, I started with the bare basics of noble society. So, in every duchy, noble children begin learning at the Royal Academy when they reach 10 years of age, I said. Went on to explain that duchies were ranked according to influence, their students' grades had an impact on this influence, and that the Archduke had ordered me to raise Ehrenfest's ranking while I was attending as an Archduke candidate, namely through raising our duchy's average grades and establishing trends. Ehrenfest hopes to spread products like Rinsham, hairpins, recipes, cooking, utensils, books, plant paper, and ink as trends throughout the entire country. These are all my inventions, of course, so Ehrenfest elected to wait for me to awaken before putting this plan into motion. And that means you have already started spreading them in the Royal Academy, Benno observed. I could tell from his narrowed eyes that he had wanted this information much, much sooner, but that hadn't been an option. I was given these orders just prior to leaving for the Royal Academy, and so I did not have time to contact anyone. Did scholars not send word to you? We received messages instructing us not to allow Rinsham, hairpins, or books outside of the duchy. We thankfully predicted this was leading into plans for widespread distribution, so we have already prepared as well as we could. I would expect nothing less from you, Benno. Your business acumen has once again served you well, I said. I knew that I could count on Benno to have prepared to expand his business, despite the instructions having said to keep products within the duchy. So what is the current state of these trends, Benno asked. Does the fact you have returned now mean they are already widely known? First of all, I am electing to spread the products gradually over my time in the Royal Academy rather than spreading everything at once in my first year. This was so that Ehrenfest would remain a long-standing influential force instead of a mere flash in the pan. Otto gave a few fascinated nods. As he suggested, I am sure Ehrenfest will attract many merchants who will find new markets every time they visit. I also believe nobles from other duchies will start arriving to look over the products themselves. Ehrenfest receives few visitors from elsewhere in the country, so I predict this will bring about great change within the duchy. As someone who had experience roaming all over the place as a traveling merchant, Otto knew what he was talking about. Compared to its neighbors, Frambeltag and Ehrenbach, Ehrenfest had less to draw in outside visitors, which meant nobles from other duchies rarely actually visited us. This was especially the case now that only nobles with the Archduke's direct approval could enter. Now that he mentions it, I guess I barely ever see nobles from other duchies here. This year, I'm going to spread Rinsham, hairpins, pound cake, and plant paper throughout the Royal Academy. They are all things I use on a regular basis, and they are easy topics to discuss at tea parties. Would it be reasonable to say their popularity among Ehrenfest nobles also influenced your decision, Gustav asked, stroking his chin. I responded with a brisk nod. Additionally, I believe it will be relatively simple to build new workshops for them, I said. We will want to profit from our products as much as we can before their production methods spread and the rest of the duchies catch up technologically. I also expect other duchies to begin producing similar products as soon as their production methods are known. All the products I was proposing were things Lutz and I had made when we were poor kids in the lower city. To reproduce them, all one needed to know was the production method. Everything else was mostly easy. That was why I was wanting to wring as much money from them as possible before they really caught on throughout the country. Otto nodded, a grim expression on his face. He represented the Gilberta company, which sold Rinsham and the hairpins. Once the spread of products that other duchies can reproduce starts to slow, I plan to spread printing. Our presses are by no means easy to prepare, and they are not even common in Ehrenfest yet, correct? It will take some time for them to spread through other duchies, and that is when their existence actually comes to light. We will secure a monopoly on printing for a good while if we can keep the production method a secret. Benno nodded this time, though in contrast to Otto, his expression was of utmost approval. I wish to increase the number of presses in Ehrenfest, expanding the industry such that other duchies will see our books in the Royal Academy over the coming years, and then bring us manuscripts to print. In truth, I would like to spread books as far and wide as possible in as short a time frame as possible, but... Lady Rosemine, being too hasty is often detrimental to business. I thoroughly believe we should take our time, allowing the printing industry to spread through society slowly but surely. Those were Benno's words, but I could tell that he really wanted to say, hold your frickin' horses. You've got to lay the groundwork first. The complete lack of mirth in his dark red eyes, despite his polite smile, was enough to confirm me that I wasn't too far from the truth. At every tea party I attended, nobles praised our wrencham and hairpins, while complimenting the pound cakes as very pleasant to eat despite their rustic appearance. Praise for these products comes from Klassenberg and the Royal Academy's professors, so I imagine there will soon be many duchies nipping at our heels for them. Klassenberg, a player that large is involved, Gustav breathed, his eyes widening at my reveal. He was probably familiar with the names and ranks of other duchies, considering that he was involved with most of the importing and exporting done in Ehrenfest. In contrast, Benno and Otto responded to something other than the Klassenberg name. Lady Rosemond, in what way will other duchies be involving themselves in the near future? Socializing season in the Royal Academy has not begun quite yet, but I had to hurry home after finishing my classes to participate in the dedication ritual. Thus, I had only had tea parties with the Klassenberg Archduke candidate, some professors, and the second prince. I do not know how things will develop in my... Oh, dear Lord, they're going to have a cow when they hear about the second prince. Lady Rosemond, did you just say that you have only had tea parties with a student from a greater duchy, professors, and a member of royalty? Does that mean... Gustav went silent, his face paling as he glanced over at Otto. His instincts were as good as one would expect from someone who had done much business with nobles while serving as the guildmaster of the Merchants Guild. Indeed, I want the Gilberta Company to make a hairpin for the second prince so that he may present it to the aforementioned Archduke candidate from Klassenberg for her coming-of-age ceremony. Not just Gustav, but also his servants reeled in shock at the absurdity of my request. They shot Otto sympathetic looks, but Otto himself did not even react. Could I ask for more details on her hair color and the color of what she plans to wear? Blonde hair comes in a variety of shades, Otto said, urging his assistant Theo to prepare to write out my explanation. She is often compared to the goddess of light herself. Her hair is similar to Lutz's in color, and I imagine it will only become even more similarly colored once she begins using Rinsham. Her outfit is going to be red in the fashion of Geduld. From there, we discussed what flowers should accompany the red Coralies, how large they should be, and so on. Otto, do you understand the situation? Gustav asked in disbelief, a slight grimace on his face. This hairpin is being offered to royalty. I do, but what is there to worry about? The prince liked the hairpin that Lady Rosemond was wearing, given that we are the only duchy making them at the moment. If we produce the best hairpin the Gilberta Company has ever made, it will technically be the best hairpin in the country. Not to mention, Otto looked at the hairpin I was wearing. It was one Thule had made for me while I was asleep. The Gilberta Company's craftswomen are getting better and better with each hairpin they develop, as they find new techniques and devise new flower patterns, he continued. I am very proud of them. If we use the highest quality thread and have our most skilled craftswomen use all of the techniques they have developed, I am confident we will be able to meet both Lady Rosemind's and the prince's expectations. But Klassenberg and royalty are... Gustav began, still unsatisfied. He was the only one among them who firmly understood the vast difference between Ehrenfest and Klassenberg. Benno gave a light shrug. Guildmaster, think about the bigger picture here. Serving an Archduke candidate from Klassenberg and a member of royalty is no more intimidating than serving someone like Lady Rosemond, he said in a faux polite tone. That's a terrible comparison, Benno. It doesn't matter whether they're from Ehrenfest or a foreign duchy. Failure is not an option. All nobles can crush us like bugs, no matter what, so yeah, you kinda don't really, You can't really go any worse if you were to piss off the prince versus you pissed off a noble in Ehrenfest, because it's going to end up the same way. Most likely with you dead. So, yeah. Simply by virtue of their higher birth, nobles could force common merchants to do just about anything they wanted. Bennett was taking that to its logical conclusion and saying that to merchants, serving an Ehrenfest lay noble was pretty much the same as serving royalty. They couldn't afford to mess up with either. That's the kind of absurd courage I like to see. Given that you were only offering up the hairpin, working for royalty might even be easier, I noted. This was an order from me, and working with me was a lot easier for them than working with any other archnoble. Not to mention, they wouldn't need to deal with the recipient directly. Only Sylvester was going to suffer here. Yeah, that is true. Lady Rosamond, when is the deadline? When is her coming-of-age ceremony? The coming-of-age ceremonies in the Royal Academy occur at the end of winter. You will want to have completed the hairpin before then. Understood. With the order for Eglantine's hairpin now placed, it felt as though a load had been taken off my shoulders. I decided it was time to change the topic of conversation. Now, as for plant paper, the existing name immediately reveals the source material. I have been calling it new paper in the Royal Academy as a result, but that doesn't communicate all that much. It needs a new name. Do you have any suggestions? Benno asked. Perhaps something to do with the Gutenbergs? I could tell from his expression that he was warning me against giving another product a strange name. I was thinking Lutz paper is appropriate since he was the first person to actually make it. Might I counter by suggesting mine paper? Lutz asked in an instant, making it clear that Lutz paper was the absolute last thing he wanted. It would certainly be more appropriate in my eyes. Mine paper? No thanks, absolutely not. My name doesn't need to be anywhere near it. Well, then his name doesn't need to be anywhere near it. After regarding Lutz with sympathetic eyes, Mark asked for my permission to speak with a warm smile. I naturally provided it. Might I suggest incorporating the name of the province each type of paper is created in? Ilgner creates paper that's completely unlike that made in Ehrenfest. And with this in mind, I would recommend using Ilgner paper and Ehrenfest paper. That will also help spread Ehrenfest's name in the sovereignty, Benno said in support of the idea. The quality and type of paper varied greatly based on the wood that was made from. Geographic names would not only be easier to remember than the names of people, that would also better market our duchy. Very well, we can go with Ehrenfest paper then, I conceded, at which point Let's let out a heavy sigh of relief. Lady Rosamond, do you believe Ehrenfest paper is going to be a popular product? Benno asked. It is too early to say. I use it regularly in class in the library, but I cannot say the same of everyone from Ehrenfest. At the moment, it is largely earning attention from the professors who tend to be buried in paperwork. The students have little interest. I would expect as much, Gustav said, stroking his chin. Archnobles and archduke candidates can simply continue purchasing parchment without needing to bother with any new forms of paper. Lay nobles, meanwhile, would still not be able to afford to use Ehrenfest paper every day, even with it being somewhat cheaper than parchment. I am giving some paper to the students transcribing books in the library in the hope of establishing it as something to be used casually. That said, those ordered to transcribe books by higher status students are normally provided with parchment, so it might not feel so casual after all. When dealing with vast amounts of text, paper is much more convenient and takes up less space than wooden boards, but I assume that isn't easy for students to understand, Gustav said. As it turned out, he had moved away from using wooden boards and now did all the bookkeeping for the Merchants Guild and plant paper. Nice! It took up much less space and made transporting documents a great deal easier, something that Benno had observed while moving so many people to Ilgner and Haldensdale for work. Wooden boards were just that wasteful when it came to space. Lady Rosamond, it may be wise to ask the Archduke to standardize the use of plant paper among Ehrenfest scholars, Gustav suggested. If they see for themselves how much easier it is to work with, their passion might be conveyed when they recommend it to other duchies. I see the wisdom in your words. I shall suggest this to Sylvester. I cannot talk right. We didn't want our own scholars not using our prime export. In fact, the more they used it, the better. I didn't want to be my own biggest customer, with the Temple and the Merchants Guild taking second place. We needed the paper to start being used throughout the castle so that the paper will naturally integrate into the noble society throughout the scholars. Oh, that reminds me. I wish for the planting company to make a tool in which one can store paper. I will gather the Gutenbergs to discuss this at a later date, I said. There are a great many things I wanted for businesses. Binders, folders, and filing cabinets to name a few. Gustav looked at me like a predator who had discovered its prey. Lady Rosamond, might I suggest entrusting such work to companies other than the planting company? There are many who wish to work with you, he said. I tilted my head slightly. I believe I have exclusivity with the planting company. Would it not be better for the planting company to distribute work as they please? Just as Benno's carpentry workshop directed me to Ingo? I doubt that would be standard for merchants in the city. It is, but the sheer size of your orders are creating too strong of an imbalance in the workload. So he said, but all the Gutenbergs were so busy that they were more than eager to delegate work to others who were competent enough. The fact that they hadn't managed to find anyone, however, probably indicated that others lacked the skill and reliability needed to complete these jobs. I fully trust Benno and all the other Gutenbergs, so I am happy for them to redistribute work as they see fit. Plus, assuming the work produced is satisfactory, those who they choose are more likely to be chosen for future projects as well. To put it simply, the Gutenbergs were just a collection of merchants and craftspeople capable of meeting my demands. Johann, Ingo, and Heidi, for example, were all introduced to me through Benno. Their talents in their respective fields had served me well, and since then, they were all pulling their weight with orders. There was even Zach, who had come to me voluntarily to promote his talents. I was more than willing to embrace any skilled worker who wanted to provide their assistance. However, as the Archduke orders more and more work to be done, our need to minimize unknown elements that may cause problems becomes greater than ever. If Benno was hesitant to distribute work to someone despite wanting nothing more than to lessen his own burden, then I am equally hesitant. I will allow you to settle these things yourselves, I concluded, ultimately rejecting Gustav's proposal. I wasn't about to stick my nose into merchant drama. I turned my attention to Benno. Given that you planned ahead, I presume that you are not monopolizing all the work, I asked. Pretty sure there was no way he could handle it all. Benno nodded cautiously. We require your permission to create new plant paper workshops, and have been unable to expand as a result. However, ever since Renshan began growing popular among Ehrenfest nobles, I worked with my little sister, who was wed in another city, and other extended family members to expand Renshan production into other locations. Good. But yeah, this is the other sister that he has. Wowee, it looks like a lot of Renshan workshops popped up while I was asleep. I suppose then that production can increase even further if you buy the oil used in Renshan from food workshops and have the Gilberta Company's workshop focus only on producing the product itself. What matters here is what is used for the scrub and the ratios. Theo and Leon from the Gilberta Company widened their eyes as they wrote down what I had said. Does mass-producing the hairpins seem feasible? For a year now, we have been working with several workshops through the Tailors Guild to make hairpins for winter handiwork. They are the simplest hairpins possible, marketed towards commoners. Those who make the best ones are given more advanced flowers to create, and we are growing our numbers by hiring them once their Lahange contracts end. By separating the orders based on skill, they had managed to achieve something that resembled mass production. They had no other choice since mass production was necessary to meet the demands of nobles once attaching flower ornaments to clothing was in vogue. Not to mention, it turned out that Thule going from apprentice to working for the Archduke's adopted daughter in a matter of years had resulted in rumors that making hairpins was the fastest way for girls to move up in the world. I can imagine Thule will become a living legend if she ends up entrusted with the prince's order. Wow, that's my big sister for you. I gave a curt nod, making sure to hide my excitement. As always, I am impressed with your work. Given that the Rensham and the hairpins have already expanded enough, what say we start establishing new paper workshops starting next spring? Lady Rosamund, Haldensale will need to come first, Benno said. I will settle any Haldensale matters after the dedication ritual. Should you find that Gil's reports are lacking in any way, please provide documents to fill the gap. As you wish. It seemed that Benno already knew what he would need. I mentally clapped my hands together in approval, at which point Gustav asked what our approach was going to be with the pound cake. The plan to sell the basic recipe at the Archduke conference to those who request it. Is to sell the basic recipe to those who request it. We are trailblazers with experienced chefs and more developed kitchens, and thus will have an advantage for some time. Incidentally, as a free tip, those in the sovereignty are so used to excessively sweet foods that they preferred the powerfully sweet honey pound cake more than any other flavor. Oh, honey, you say? Gustav asked, having not expected to receive such intel. I was going to need his help with a lot of work moving forward, so giving out this information for free was something of an investment. You would do well to keep that in mind when there are merchants from other duchies flooding in after the Archduke conference. You have my thanks. One thing I ask is that you prepare accommodations for the merchants and travelers who are going to be coming to our duchy. I imagine the inns won't be able to support them all, and the city's infrastructure might best be prepared. This is not something I imagine nobles will care about in the least, but some commoner merchants will, for the most part, be seeing our lower city. Another important matter was stock. It was ideal for merchants to come to Ehrenfest to market our goods further, but a shortage of products would decrease interest and perhaps even infuriate merchants. Social order would pretty much fall apart if a bunch of outsiders came and fought over sparse resources. We will want to remain in close contact with the city guards to maintain the peace, and coordination with the guilds for inns and eateries will also be essential. I am going to entrust these duties to the Merchants Guild. Gustav responded to my words with wide-eyed shock, but I merely smiled at him and continued. You may delegate any of this work to these merchants you trust so much. Benno looked over at Gustav, barely able to contain his laughter. These merchants who wanted connections with Lady Rosamund will certainly be pleased now, he said with a slight smirk, that more or less said, you get what you deserve. Gustav glared at Benno before choking out a conflicted understood. Those local to our city may struggle to identify any flaws in its infrastructure. I am told that Otto previously worked as a traveling merchant. Perhaps you could learn something by discussing his perspective on things, I suggested. Benno very nearly broke into a grin as Gustav sat there completely frozen in shock. It was only when Mark cleared his throat that he snapped back into reality, and in an instant his expression became serious once again. Lady Rosamund, what exactly is the Archduke Conference? He asked. I was sadly unable to answer, having never gone to one myself. The most I really knew was all the Archdukes and Archduchesses and Jürgen Schmidt all came together. I have never attended one, as I am not an Archduchess, I replied. Ob Ehrenfest has said that the Archdukes gathered to discuss trade and deals, but that is all I know. Thankfully, Gustav seemed to know more about the conferences. I only ever received the result from which scholar officials, but the Archduke Conference decided which merchants are dispatched to other duchies, as well as how traveling merchants are removed, so I am somewhat familiar with them, he began. From there, he explained the developments that followed particular decisions in the past. It turned out to be a pretty significant source of change. I am told that Ob Ehrenfest wishes to hear your perspective on which duchies are best to work with, and to what degree we should work with them. You will receive a summons from him once the blizzards stop. Oh my, did you arrange for this, Lady Rosamund? Gustav asked. I can hardly express my gratitude. I tilted my head in visible confusion, which seemed to prompt an explanation. It turned out that the Archduke and other nobles never paid any mind to the circumstances of common merchants, and generally informed them of the results of each year's Archduke Conference in the form of orders sent through scholars. That made sense given that nobles really didn't see commoners as fellow human beings, but it was hardly an approach that would lead to success. A normal noble would never discuss things with us ahead of time, as you are, Lady Rosamund. Our contact will begin and end with their orders. Subsequently, the responsibility falls entirely on us if we fail, so we are entirely grateful to get in any words at all before the conference is held. That's normal? Unbelievable! That seems insane to me. No wonder Ehrenfest's influence is so weak. No wonder Sylvester and Ferdinand disagreed with my suggestion. They had never consulted merchants before and were just stunned into silence by the idea of actually bringing up their thoughts at the conference. That said, even during the meeting at the Italian restaurant, Ob Ehrenfest came without his scholars and willingly listened to our perspective directly, Gustav continued. Perhaps our lives are going to be a little easier, at least until his successor comes to power. When you put it like that, Sylvester seems like an outstanding leader who carefully listens to those beneath him instead of a loose cannon who just wanted to visit the lower city and try new food. I will arbitrate as best I can such that your discussion with Ob Ehrenfest goes smoothly, I assured Gustav, deciding not to correct him. I saw no good reason to cruelly dash his hopes. We appreciate it. Your support is a much-needed source of encouragement, Benno said, this time giving me a look that said not to butt in too much. It was truly amazing what he was able to communicate through expressions alone. It is safe for me to assume that everyone gathered here today is going to be attending the meeting, I said. Letters of invitation need to be written for each individual ahead of time. It is standard for each representative to bring one companion to the castle, Gustav replied. I see. I will direct the scholars accordingly, I had noted. Gustav had done the most business with nobles out of all the commoners here, so it seemed reasonable enough for me to follow his advice. With that said, I fell silent and looked at Lutz, who caught my eye and stiffened up at once. As much as I didn't want to say what was about to come next, I didn't have a choice. I inhaled sharply and then spoke, doing my best to stop my voice from quavering. It is possible the upcoming discussion will result in our magic contracts being nullified. We had to consider that the contracts I had signed with Lutz when I was mine might no longer be valid. Benno had signed them ahead of time to engineer a way for us to stay connected even after my move to the nobles' quarter, but now they were very likely going to be eliminated as an inconvenience. I knew it was necessary to scale up production and spread it throughout the country, but still, my connection to Lutz was already hanging by a thread, and this was going to make it even more precarious. The sadness welling up inside me at the thought was unbearable. The Planting Company will receive 3 letters of invitation. Please do not fail to bring Lutz, I said, keeping my gaze fixed on the floor, balling my hand in a tight fist as I tried to stop them from trembling. Benno must have predicted this request as well, as he gave me a concerned nod. As you wish. We went on to clarify that the meeting in the castle would take place once the blizzard stopped, that I was going to be in attendance, and that they would want to prepare documents regarding their current production capacities and the amount of elbow room they had remaining. The blizzard is getting stronger, Gil eventually interjected while staring out the window. Everyone fell silent in an instant. There was still a lot for us to discuss, but we simply didn't have the time. The blizzard could only get worse from here, so it was in my visitors' best interest to leave as soon as possible. Benno indirectly thanked me for giving them the chance to talk things over before the Archduke eventually summoned them, and with that, our meeting came to an abrupt end. I let out a quiet sigh as I gazed out the window, watching everyone hurry home amid the increasingly heavy blizzard until the glass eventually clouded over. There had been too many people present during our meeting for me to hug Let's, and the thought of our contracts getting canceled just made me depressed. I know it has to be done, but still. After drinking down the last of my tea with a dejected sigh, I returned to my High Bishop's chambers. Ooh, the epilogue. Here we go. Okay, this is from Benno's point of view, I guess. Benno reflexively held down his hat the moment he exited the temple. The blizzard was stronger now than when he had arrived. He climbed down the stairs with his collar popped, heading straight toward and then climbing through the open door of the waiting carriage. Mark and Lutz rushed in soon after, covered in snow from the short walk. The driver shut the door behind them, and the carriage started moving in no time. I feel bad for the driver. The driver has to sit in that blizzard while he drives it. Good lord, I feel bad for him. Ever since Rosemond had become the High Bishop, Benno had started receiving official invites in response to his request for meetings and would arrive at the temple via carriage. The driver was surely going through hell driving them in this weather, but it was worth it. Unlike the Authoner Company, the planting company wasn't located right by the temple, so making the journey on foot would have only gotten them buried in snow. The carriage moved slower than usual, likely due to the snow blocking the driver's vision. Inside, the silence was almost deafening, broken only by an annoyingly loud rattle as the windows endured the heavy winds. Lutz would normally spend the journey back discussing his time with Rosemond in her hidden room and what he should or shouldn't say to her family, but today he just stared at the floor with his lips pressed tightly together. Benno noticed that Mark was looking at him with a concerned expression, but he just shook his head and stared out the window with a sigh. I know this is because the magic contracts are getting nullified, but what to do about this? Their meeting today had not gone as Lutz was used to. Once the introductions were complete, they would usually be taken into the hidden room where Rosemond would speak out as a noble, or not as a noble, but as mine. There, Lutz was able to speak freely, and mine would listen to him as though it were completely normal. Today, however, the Guildmaster had also been in attendance, and only he, Benno, and Anna were generally permitted to speak. Lutz had no doubt been shaken to the core by Rosemond casually announcing that their contract was going to be nullified, especially considering the noble smile on her face, but he probably hadn't noticed how she really felt. She had maintained a calm composure when she brought up the matter, but her hands were tightly clenched and trembling slightly. We need to keep Rosemond emotionally stable here. Both the Plantain and the Gilberta companies still needed Rosemond's backing, and this conversation had confirmed there would soon be a flood of merchants coming in from other duchies. The lower city merchants would most likely be crushed without someone to shield them from the unreasonable demands they would surely face. All it took was a whim or a bit of misplaced anger for a noble to end them. As the one who had gotten Thule into the Gilberta company, Lutz into the Plantain company, and the Guildmaster to stay away from Rosemond, Benno knew it was his responsibility to keep Rosemond emotionally stable so that she could protect the Gutenbergs and the lower city merchants. And to keep her stable, we need Lutz to get a grip too. Welcome back, Master Benno. A servant greeted them as they went inside the Plantain company. The interior was dim, and there was nobody else inside, as was to be expected. No normal person would risk going out to buy books and paper in the midst of an intense blizzard, so they would close up shop until the weather calmed. Alejandros couldn't come to work either, meaning that during such periods the Plantain company largely housed only 3 people: Benno the owner, Mark the Laharo, and Lutz the Laharo apprentice. There were also some servants and a chef who only lived there during the winter. Most of those willing to live in a closed store over the winter were bachelors without a family or any relatives to help with winter preparation, those who were on bad terms with their families and wanted to avoid being shacked up with them for an entire season, and those who were looking to save money for when they were married by living with their employer rather than spending on winter preparations. The chef stayed with them this winter was in the 3rd camp, and since he worked in the Italian restaurant, their meals were more than satisfactory. Benno and the others knocked the snow from their clothes as they climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor where they lived. The furnace in the shared living space had already been lit, making it so much warmer. Benno exhaled with relief, but there was no time to linger. Mark, bring tea to my room. Let's keep your coat on and come with me. We need to talk. Still wearing his coat, Benno went into his room and started a fire in his personal furnace. His own room was frosty cold since they usually stayed in the living room to save on costs. They were technically wasting firewood, but there wasn't much they could do when talking about Rosemine. They couldn't risk the servants overhearing. Les trudged in with slumped shoulders and a clouded expression. He had entered after Benno, who pulled up a chair and sat right next to the furnace, staring into the fire as he waited for the Harl apprentice to do the same. Les, you need to keep yourself under control, otherwise Rosemine is going to become unstable, Benno said, looking the boy over. If you ever need to let out some feelings or vent your frustrations, do that here. Don't show weakness like this in the temple. Let's watch the fire slowly grow bigger and then shut his eyes tightly. I don't think she cares anymore. Excuse me? She does! Dude, why do you think that? I can't believe she didn't even blink when she talked about nullifying our contracts, she murmured. She probably doesn't even care about them anymore. Yeah, this is what we get for relying on the hidden room too much. Benno ran his fingers through his slicked back hair, letting it down. For Les, it had been normal to use the hidden room when talking about important things. He had given Rosemine reports to Gil and Fritz in the past, but he wasn't used to talking to her about important things when she was wearing her normal persona. Are you stupid? Benno asked. Like hell, Rosemine wants those contracts nullified. But Master Benno, the magic contracts are more important to her than anyone. Could you not see how desperate she is to cling to her few remaining connections to the lower city? To be honest, considering how we're going to be expanding these businesses, these contracts are nothing but a problem for you and me. Let's firmly shook his head. Nothing but a problem, he echoed, his voice quavering. Benno scratched his head. Let's was a lot more dependent on these contracts than he had thought. Think about it as an apprentice Laharo in the planting company, he said. There were a lot of good opportunities we couldn't take advantage of while she was asleep due to those contracts, remember? And she's sickly enough that it might happen again sometime. Those contracts just don't work for industries being expanded at the command of an archduke. Without Rosemine's approval, they hadn't been able to make Haldensdale its own plant paper guild, and even when it came to printing and making books, there were some things they couldn't do without her. Mine becoming Rosemine had resulted in paper making and printing becoming official Dutchy industries, and with the Archduke now steering them into popularity, it didn't make sense to ask her permission for every single little thing. Let's looked up at the start, but the contracts they're always just for insurance. We didn't know if some random noble would snatch mine away when she went to the temple, and our contracts were a way for us to keep in touch with her. Of course, mine had then been passed off as dead, and Rosemine became the Archduke's adopted daughter. The Gilberta Company was a growing star that had secured the exclusive business of the trailblazing Archducal family, while Benno and the others were awarded the name planted by the Archduke's adopted daughter. No longer did they need to worry about Rosemine suddenly going missing or not being allowed to see them anymore. Everything's different from how it was back then, Benno concluded. You two don't need those contracts anymore. Let's mulled over those words for a moment, then repeated, everything's different. The contracts had made sense back when the immediate short term was more important than anything else. But now that the planting company was guaranteed a role in the Archduke's expanding industries, there wasn't much use for them at all. But that's not true for her. Barely any time has passed since she woke up from her 2-year slumber, and she hasn't yet had an opportunity to see anyone from her family, Benno explained. Her losing one more tiny connection to the lower city runs the risk of making her as emotionally unstable as she was before. Yeah, like when she was stuck in the temple and she couldn't leave, and she got so freaking homesick and upset that she started going rainbow-eyed all the time when they mentioned her being adopted. When Ferdinand had to hug her. So yeah, we don't want her like that again. So you gotta do something about it. He was alluding to their first meeting after Rosemine had woken up, when she had mentioned being unable to cry no matter how much she wanted to, and then immediately burst into tears. Rosemine was living all alone in noble society as the Archduke's daughter, who knew what might destabilize her. Just discussing business with archnobles was enough to exhaust Benno. It was impossible to see how much greater of a burden she was enduring. Back when mine was an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden, she had called Lutz and Thule over to the temple on a regular basis when she was stuck there over the winter. Those were ancient memories to Lutz since he was a kid, and that was 2 years ago, but to Benno it had happened just recently. You should know better than anyone that no matter how calm Rosemine looks, she's not necessarily calm on the inside, Benno said. Mine had given Lutz consoling smiles, even when enduring the tremendous pain of the devouring. Benno's childhood sweetheart from when he was 13 had also endured it, yeah. Dang it, what was her name? I can't even remember, Liz or something like that. The one he wanted to marry but had died before he got to, she had the devouring, but she had so little mana that it got her when she was 13. So, yeah. And the way she had screamed when the heat welled up out of nowhere stuck with him to this day. His brows knitted as he thought back to that girl, the love of his life, whom he had failed to save. You may not have seen it, Lutz, but her hands were shaking when she brought up nullifying the contracts. Don't let her noble facade fool you. Lutz swallowed hard, his expression twisting into a grimace. He was frustrated at himself for not having paid enough attention to Rosemine. Let's stay on track here. Our job doesn't change whether those contracts are there or not. We've still got our eyes on the same prize, and given how hard it is for Rosemine to meet with her family, you're the only one who can keep her calm. If at any point she gets unstable, you can let her cry on you until she's satisfied, and reassure her that nothing's changed, or so you've done it as you've done before. It was then that Lutz's eyes finally stopped wavering. He faced forward, slapped himself on the cheeks, and nodded. Yes, Master Benno. That should do it, Benno thought, letting out a relieved sigh at Lutz having calmed down. So long as Lutz stays strong, Rosemine will manage somehow. Master Benno, I have brought the tea, Mark said, stepping into the room as though he had been waiting for the exact moment the conversation came to a close. He glanced at Lutz, then nodded. If you have finished your discussion, shall we move to the living room? It is much warmer there. Benno paused for a moment. Nah, it's easier to work here when there's more paperwork. I'll start gathering input on the lower city infrastructure improvements Rosemine was talking about. You will need additional documents for when you go to the castle to explain things to the Archduke, correct? Lutz asked, immediately picking up his boards and some ink with a confident smile. Benno grinned right back at him. They might not have been able to go out in the snow, but there was still plenty for them to do. There was no time to mope. It is nice to see you both so motivated, but I did just prepare tea, Mark noted. Might I suggest you begin drinking? His intimidating smile strongly encouraged them not to let the drinks go to waste. Benno and Lutz exchanged glances before hurriedly picking up their teacups. Yeah, don't do that. Ooh, what's this? Honest courting. Oh, is this the prince's point of view? Ooh, we're getting some drama. We're getting some deeds. Come on, spill the tea. Come on. The girl sitting before me lowered her gaze, her long eyelashes casting small shadows across her face. Her soft lips parted slightly as she sipped from her teacup. Eglantine is as beautiful as ever. I had initially learned about her when we were both young. My father, the fifth prince, had been deemed irrelevant to the Civil War, and subsequently ignored, but he was ultimately convinced to join the battle by the previous Ob Klausenberg. Eglantine's entire family had succumbed to poison in the midst of the conflict, and Eglantine herself survived only because she had yet to be baptized and could therefore still eat in the room for children. So yeah, she wasn't in there when they all got poisoned, and thus, well, yeah. She was then swiftly taken in by the Klausenbergs, her maternal relatives. It was through those experiences that Eglantine became the tragic princess who had lost her family and royal status in the Civil War. When I first saw Eglantine in the Royal Academy, she was already dazzling beyond her 10 years. Her beauty was not all she had. Her grades surpassed even my own as a member of royalty. Yeah, this is the prince, okay. And she possessed a gentle character which earned her respect from her retainers and even those of the lower-ranked duchies. She was already expected to one day surpass my father in terms of mana quantity and number of elements, since she was the daughter of the late third prince, but she had most likely already achieved this at 10 years of age. My father heeded Klausenberg's plea that Eglantine wished to return to royalty, and so he gave her a choice. She could marry my brother, or she could marry me, and the person she chose would become the next king. It was then that I desired the throne for the first time, and that was because I desired her. Yeah, he wants her, not the throne. The throne is just a bonus, essentially. He wants to be with her, not the throne, her. He loves her. And, yeah. And we're going to get into the reason as to why Eglantine doesn't want to go through this. It was actually explained to me in a comment. I think it was the last video that I uploaded that got the comment, but essentially she doesn't want the two fighting over her and essentially causing another war. She doesn't want any more bloodshed. Excuse me. I watched the slight movement in Eglantine's throat as she swallowed a sip of tea. She then quietly set down her cup and withdrew her hand, her fingertips the color of ripened prime beers, moving with such grace that they practically danced through the air. I stared at the arcs they made so closely that I almost burned the sight into my eyes. It was the duty of royalty to carefully observe the poison-tasting process our testing process, and that was the justification I was going with. Eglantine noticed my gaze, at which point her bright orange eyes crinkled into a gentle smile. Prince Anastasius, please do eat to your heart's content, she said. I picked up my own teacup and took a sip myself, as proper etiquette dictated, but I was agonizing the entire time. How was I going to put them into words? I needed to express my feelings to her directly, yet it was proving to be a greater challenge than I ever could have imagined. My fingers tightened around the handle to my cup, causing small ripples to spread across the liquid within. A groan built up within my throat without my knowing. Will a straightforward expression of my love not become an order? Not really, unless you frame it as such. All you have to do is tell her that she is free to reject you, because, I mean, that would make it not an order, right? Firm words from royalty became an order. This was a fact drilled into me since birth, and so I had followed proper courting etiquette and only expressed my feelings to Eglantine through others. My older brother, the first prince, was sending her letters and gifts as well, but he had never courted her in person. However, my brother has no feelings for Eglantine. He wishes to marry her only to acquire the throne, so he only wants the throne. Sigiswald already had a wife from a middle duchy, one who was planned to become his second wife once he married a woman from a greater duchy. The moment that thought crossed my mind, I heard Rosemine's voice echoing through my mind. Lady Eglantine indicated that you and your brother are proposing to her for political reasons. To think she assumed this entire time that I too was only after the throne. I could not help but sigh. My brother already had a wife, and I would not stand him marrying Eglantine so frivolously. I wanted to make this beautiful woman happy with my own two hands, and it was for this reason alone that I sought the throne, even though it would make an enemy out of my brother. Please excuse my rudeness, Prince Anastasius, but did you not mention having something important to discuss? Eglantine asked, tilting her head with a confused expression. It seemed that I had contemplatively stared into my tea for much too long. Oh, come on, boy, you can do it. Come on, tell her. Tell her, at least hint to it. At least hint that you like her as a person instead of just for the throne. You know? You could just tell her, screw the throne, I don't want the throne. Because, I mean, I'm assuming that his brother is going to get the throne anyway because he's older. Or he could just tell his father, if I could marry her and not take the throne, I would do it. But I don't think that's possible. I set down my cup and partook in the prepared sweets. The sugary lumps fell apart in my mouth. Sweets of this nature were commonly served at the sovereignty, but perhaps due to my having eaten Ehrenfest sweets recently, they tasted far sweeter than usual. What am I to do? Even when facing Eglantine alone, I could not speak my feelings so abruptly. I almost reached for the sound-blocking magic tools in my pocket, but I ultimately paused. It was much too early. My mind raced for something to open with, but all that came to mind were Rosemine's harsh words. You had a tea party with Rosemine, did you not? I finally asked. Oh my, has Lady Rosemine said something? Eglantine asked. Her smile deepened, but I was watching her carefully enough to notice her cheeks tense up ever so slightly. Had they discussed something she did not want me to hear? Yes! Yes, oh dear Lord, yes! Or had Rosemine been so rude to her that she found the memory appalling? They best not have amused themselves by speaking ill of me. Only person who would probably do that would be Rosemine. Because, I mean, Eglantine has no reason to. Rosemine's evil, poisonous smile flashed through my mind. I envisioned myself dropping a fist on her skull in an attempt to calm down, then composed myself with a light cough. So, what do you think of Ehrenfest? They certainly have introduced many strange products this year. How do they seem to those from Klausenberg the First? As royalty, I also thought it important to find out what the professors think about her. This wasn't a complete lie. Ehrenfest was producing a continuous stream of unique products, from new sweets to hair ornaments to some kind of medicine that made one's hair glossy. A middle duchy that had once struggled to maintain its already low rank had all of a sudden become a presence that was impossible to ignore. There were no doubt problems I could prevent simply by knowing what the other duchies thought about this, and memories of the kerfuffle with Dunkelfelger were still fresh in my mind. I was also receiving many requests from students wishing to become the new master of the library's magic tools, though I was refusing them all. You can't do that. You're gonna have to overpower mine's mana capacity if she doesn't give her permission, and that's gonna be impossible. Well, Eglantine began, I suppose it has gone from being a middle duchy that ascended the rankings purely through its neutrality in the Civil War, to a duchy that has finally begun to develop enough strength to justify its rank. I nodded, though I did not quite agree. Are you not overestimating them? The past has shown that no matter how skilled or excellent an individual from Ehrenfest may be, they do not bring the entire duchy to that height. Their brilliance ends with them, and their influence remains soundly on an individual level. Do you have any proof that Rosemine is not the same? I mean, it's kind of makes sense from that, considering that happened with Ferdinand. As soon as he left, it started going back. The stuff at the World Academy started going back down. It was not uncommon for geniuses specializing in a particular interest to appear in Ehrenfest. There was Herscher, for example, who was so devoted to research that even Professor Gundolf could make neither head nor tail of, and Christine, whose skill with the harpsichord made an eternal impression on those who had heard her play. As of yet, however, their influence had not spread enough to be advantageous to the entire duchy. It seems to me that the entire duchy is being influenced this time, Eglantine replied. All the Ehrenfest girls in the advancement ceremony had used Rensham, and the new music is known to all the students after only a number of years. I am told that students of all grades can play these new songs. Furthermore, the younger students have shown great improvements in their written lessons. Did that not begin 3 or so years ago, I asked? Rosemine might not have even been baptized at that point, and she had slept for 2 years since. Surely the improvements in their grades were not her accomplishments. This year, Ehrenfest students of all grades have made so much progress. The specifics remain unknown, but it seems to be the result of some new system that Lady Rosemine established. In a rare break of trend, Ehrenfest is clearly planning to publicize her developments and use them to benefit the entire duchy. I am quite sure Ehrenfest will see much growth while she is here. I see. And there are other Archduke candidates, I asked, changing the topic of conversation. It did not entirely please me to see Eglantine praising Rosemine so highly. Professor Primavera has described Lord Wilfrid as quite talented also. He passed court etiquette in a single attempt and is skilled at controlling his mana. However, he was frequently seen asking Rosemine for advice. Plus, while his written grades are respectable compared to other students, they are quite average for an Archduke candidate. I see. Advice during class, Rosemine had been adopted into the Archduke family, and the bad habits she had shown so thoughtlessly giving me valuable information perhaps resulted from her doing the same for the Archduke's blood-related son. They were supposed to be competing for the position of Ob as fellow candidates, but it was highly likely she had been instructed to raise and support her rival instead. Far be it from me to waste her valuable advice, then. I inhaled deeply and then took out the sound-blocking magic tools. The moment I held one out to Eglantine, she shot a brief worried glance to her attendants. Better this than clearing the room of your retainers, no? I asked. Eglantine nodded in agreement before taking the magic tool. This was far from the first time she had tried to avoid spending any time alone with me, but it hurt my heart all the same. I tightened my grip on the tool. Come on! Come on! You can do it! Tell her! Tell her! Just tell her that you like her, not for the throne, but for her. That you liked her even if you didn't have the throne. I don't care. You wouldn't care. When you spoke of Rosemine, you said that you would pick neither my brother nor me. Is that correct? Eglantine paused. It seems I have spoken too freely. Perhaps I was charmed by Lady Rosemine's adorable visage. Please forget what she told you, she eventually said, with a troubled smile, hoping to end the discussion there, but this was not something I could simply ignore. Rosemine informed me of your choice. You will obey an order to marry one of us, but not make a decision of your own. You said that you wished only for peace and not to return to royalty. Do forgive me. I do not know what overcame me to speak such words, Prince Anastasius. Truly, please do not forget what she said, Eglantine pleaded desperately, her eyes growing faintly damp with tears. A sight was cute beyond words, but I would not be swayed. If my spirit was not strong enough to see this through, I would never have tolerated Rosemine's unfathomable, harsh, and crude advice. Forgive me. I wish to grant your every request, but this is not something I can ignore. I want to know your true feelings, I said, looking at her directly. A clouded, defeated expression rose on her face. I could not tell whether it was her relenting to voice her request, or her despairing that no matter what she said, her wish could not come true. Up until recently, I was aware only that you wish to return to royalty, and it has been my desire to make your wish a reality. The man you choose will in turn become king. To take your hand in marriage, I must rule. That is the only reason I have ever wanted the throne, but now I am told that your true wish is for peace. Eglantine's smile became more intense, her eyes pleading with me to dig no further, but standing down now would not bring about any change. I gripped the sound-blocking magic tool with both hands and gazed at her more intently than ever before, hoping for even a fraction more of my feelings to be conveyed to her. My purpose is not to grant the previous Ob Klostenberg's wish. It is to grant your wish, I explained. And while it is frustrating that Rosemine was the one to point this out to me, in order to accomplish this, I want to hear your thoughts directly. I want to hear what you wish for in person with no intermediary. And then I want you to know my wish. Just as you do not wish to be royalty, I do not care about becoming the next king. Thank you. Thank you, you tell her, thank you. Sigiswald seeks the throne, and if your hand in marriage was not hanging in the balance, I would willingly let him take it. Eglantine attempted to hide behind her usual smile, but her lips were noticeably trembling. For years I had only seen her polite facade, a wall of diplomacy that firmly separated us, and that knowledge had pained me deeply, but now I was finally seeing an ounce of true emotion from her. And I couldn't help but feel glad at that fact. Perhaps it would be safe to say that a fraction of my feelings have reached her, maybe? Maybe? Come on, tell her! Tell her that if you had a choice between being with her and not having the throne, and having the throne but not being with her, then you would pick the first option. I could feel the blood coursing through my body like scorching fire. My face was hot and my ears were ringing. It was beyond me to dress my words in poetic whispers of my love, but the best I could do was say my thoughts directly. From the perspective of royalty, I was no doubt disgracing myself. I don't care. You need to do it, dude. It doesn't matter. You're doing a sound blocking manito, even if people can still read lips, but still. I yearn for nothing but you, I said. I want you to pick me, not my brother, and not anyone else. Oh! He's doing it! He's telling her! Yes! Go on, tell her! I want you to be my goddess of light and mine alone. This is not an order, of course, but my true wish. I steadied my breathing and watched Eglantine carefully. Our eyes met only for the briefest moment before she averted her gaze. Even now that I was following Rosemine's suggestion, and speaking my thoughts to her in person, it appeared she could not accept my feelings. Oh. My grip on the magic tool slackened as a wave of disappointment washed over me, but then Eglantine finally spoke. I am shocked that you would speak so directly, she whispered to herself, and my grip tightened once again as I strained to hear every word. Was that too direct of me? To tell the truth, I am following Rosemine's advice. She said that the political struggle has placed walls between us that twist our intentions. She suspected that we were not at all conveying our true goals to one another. She did? Eglantine asked. Her cheeks were flushed a bashful red so charming that it made my heart pound in my chest. This is my first time seeing such a reaction from her. Could it be that Rosemine's advice was actually working? Maybe? Hopefully? I hope? I'm a big sucker for romance. I'm sorry, guys. Yes, she casually told me that since I understand your intentions so poorly, I would need to start again from the beginning and ask you about them directly. Could you imagine anyone more rude, I asked, allowing a grin to play on my lips as I attempted to lighten the mood. Eglantine's bright orange eyes widened. I never would have expected you of all people to heed such blunt words, Prince Anastasius. Much of her advice was irritating to hear, but if she spoke truly, I was indeed putting you to suffering due to my own ignorance of your intentions. At the very least, I wanted you to know that my objective is not and will never be the throne. I certainly do understand that now, Eglantine said, lowering her eyes. I could feel the smile on my face broaden now that I understood this was her expression of shyness. If Rosemine's advice regarding this matter was correct, perhaps I should pay attention to her other advice as well. You mean to say Lady Rosamine said even more to you? I'm not sure if my heart can take much more, Eglantine murmured with a small pouty glare. It was so endearing that my heart practically leaped with joy. I reveled in the moment for a short while before recalling Rosemine's other advice. It was all unbelievably rude advice that no other would dare even speak to royalty. Would you care to hear it? Absolutely. Eglantine was now wearing her polite smile once more, but I could still sense the slight sulkiness in her expression. It was a pleasing development, and that inspired me to start with the most shocking of all Rosemine's advice. To begin with, she said I should practice my whirling more seriously if my desire is to suit you. It seems I am noticeably worse when we whirl together. Eglantine blinked at me in utter disbelief, though her stunned silence did not last. Did Lady Rosamine truly say that to you? She asked. Yes, she had my permission to speak freely, but even so, I was taken aback by the impertinence of her remarks. She criticized the way I complimented you, told me to practice Hartspiel more since you are so dedicated to the arts, and more. As I listed them off one by one, Eglantine's smile froze. Her shock was understandable. It was unthinkable for an Archduke candidate from the 13th Frank Duchy to speak so brazenly to a member of royalty. Rosamine held nothing back, and then abruptly fainted, I explained. She had said that she was feeling ill, but it never would have thought that she might pass out so suddenly. It came as enough of a surprise to me, but I cannot even remember the last time I saw Oswin look quite so traumatized. Everybody's traumatized! Eglantine had shown such a variety of new emotions as she listened to me speak that I carelessly went ahead and mentioned Rosamine's collapsing. In an instant, her expression changed. Prince Anastasius, you summoned Lady Rosamine when she was in poor health. Goodness, that must have been terrible for her. Have you at least expressed your sympathy? Me? I am willing to excuse her passing out, but as for her blunder, is it not normal for her first to request my forgiveness? No! She didn't do it on purpose. To pass out in a meeting with royalty was an unthinkable disgrace. She can't help that. If she could control not passing out, she would never pass out. She can't help that. Rosemary would need to request a meeting to plead for my forgiveness, and I would generally do just that. The suggestion that I should send a letter to express my sympathy while she was sick made little sense, though had it been Eglantine in her place, I would have not wasted any time in rushing to her side. Under normal circumstances, yes, but the request has not yet arrived, I presume. That is evidence that Rosemond has not yet recovered. Ob Ehrenfest must be hysterical. Please send words of sympathy not just for Lady Rosemond, but for her entire duchy. I see. I was aware that duchies generally do not interfere in academy affairs, but I had not realized that they receive reports so frequently. I was unsure what information was usually passed between dorms and their duchies, but Ob Ehrenfest would certainly be in a panic to have learned that his child was called before royalty, fainted, and was now so bedridden that she could not even apologize. I had nothing but sympathy for Ob Ehrenfest, who was unable to do a thing as he read about Rosemond collapsing in the farthest hall, becoming the master of the library's magic tools, and talking on Dunkelfelger in a game of dinner. Still, it would not be wise to send words of sympathy to Rosemond. There was no need to break custom for this. A poor movement on my part would result in the public assuming that Rosemond was now in my favor. I did not wish to send words of sympathy when nobody would understand what I was doing, and I was doing it only at Eglantine's request. Eglantine, I cannot produce such a letter so freely. If you would write it with me and assist with the phrasing, however, I will send it to Ehrenfest. If you insist, Eglantine conceded, agreeing to compose a sympathetic letter through which I would apologize. I noticed that her smile had softened, and as I reached out a hand to her, it felt as though she might now accept it. Eglantine, would you care to I know which gazebo this is! I think I know, because, I actually watched a video, like, a few weeks ago, I think, talking about how, relationships and romance work in this series for nobles and commoners, and this was one of the little things mentioned, the little tidbit about the gazebo. I think it was the thing at which it was the Goddess of Time, the Goddess of Time's gazebo, and I don't remember what happens in it. I just know that couples sometimes go there. Would you care to accompany me to a gazebo later to discuss this further? I will need both Ob Klausenberg and his predecessor on our side if we are to make your dream come true, no? I do not believe convincing my uncle and grandfather is going to be quite so easy, she replied. It wasn't a clear answer, but it was the first time she hadn't explicitly refused my invitation to the gazebo, which were well-known gathering spots for couples and lovers. Knew it. In an instant, I was invincible. Former political negotiations with an Ob and a former Ob were nothing compared to speaking my feelings honestly to Eglantine. How shall I convince them? I did not have much time, but this is a challenge worth pursuing. We got 26 more pages left. Do I want to do it? Yes, I do. Life without one's lady. Lady Rosemond truly did leave for the temple in no time at all, I said, mostly to myself, once she had departed via Highbeast. I really had not expected that she would disappear after spending only one day in the castle. Cornelius and Riarda turned to me, nodding in agreement with wry smiles. Whose story is this? While Norbert and several of the attendants working for the castle swiftly used magic tools to melt the snow that had blown inside and dry the area. Now, Riarda began, let us return to the northern building. We must think about our next steps. I am taking some time off so that I may briefly return home, but what about the rest of you? Did you contact your families last night? I personally hadn't made any plans, having simply confirmed that I was available for guard duty for as long as Lady Rosemond was in Ehrenfest. No point staying in the castle with nobody to guard. What are you going to do? Oh, it's Lenore. Lenore, Cornelius asked, looking my way. He and I had returned from the Royal Academy with Lady Rosemond with the intention of guarding her while she was in the castle. As we were underage, we could not accompany her to the temple. That duty was left to Daniel and Angelica. I'm thinking about asking Father about how knights should coordinate in fights. The Order should be in the middle of planning for the Lord of Winter hunt right now. I can imagine just standing nearby and listening is going to be very worthwhile. It made me happy that Cornelius was taking the results of the treasure-stealing dinner match so seriously. There were more than a few apprentice knights who still couldn't understand the importance of coordination, or how inferior we were to Dunkelfelger's knights, no matter how many times I tried to explain it. Maybe they'd learn it if Karlstadt or Bonifatius were to explain it to them and beat it into them. Lenore, will you be heading back to the Royal Academy? I remember you saying how hurrying through your lessons for Rosemond's sake hadn't given you any time to spend with your friends. and that there's a lot you want to research in the library, right? You've also got to keep in mind how much of a pain it'll be if your family gets a hold of you this winter. If you want, I can send word once Rosemine finishes the dedication ritual so you can just hurry back when we need you. Cornelius was certainly right. All of my family were dying to know more about Lady Rosemine, so returning home right now would only see me endure an endless barrage of questions. Without any guard work to do, I would inevitably be stuck talking to my uncle and everyone all winter. True, I replied. I would much rather retreat to the Royal Academy than endure my father and everyone's questioning. Will you be fine here alone, Cornelius? Should be. There's a lot I need to write up reports on, Cornelius replied with a shrug. As Rosemine's older brother by blood, he was evidently used to this kind of thing. Oh, they have no idea. They have no idea she's not related by blood. He was clearly on good terms with her, and I had seen him instructing the other retainers in the dorm, so I knew I could trust him to notify my family of my return to the academy. I wonder what they would say if they were to suddenly find out that she's actually a commoner, and not actually Karlstadt's daughter. Oh, I really don't want to think about what would happen if that would have happened. I imagine some of them wouldn't care, because they would see her as family, whether it by blood or not, because, I mean, Wilfred and Charlotte already are not related to her by blood, and yet they still see her as family, but I don't know about the whole commoner thing. What do you guys think would happen? Who do you think would reject her? Who do you think would be okay with it? Who do you think would take time to deal with it and then be okay with it? Because the only ones who know about this are Sylvester, Karlstadt, Ferdinand, and I'm assuming Elvira knows. Maybe? No, Elvira doesn't even know about this. So it's Sylvester, Karlstadt, and Ferdinand that know about this. Everybody else, I think, is in the dark, right? Actually, no, Eckert and Justice know about this too, I think. Instead, Cornelius stays while Lenore goes back to the academy tomorrow, Riarda said. I will tell Lord Sylvester to send word to the teleporter in advance. As for me, I need to gather my house for a family meeting. Traga is truly giving me a headache. Oh, that whole issue. Oh, I can't wait to see that one. I would be a fly on the wall for that one. I really hope they animate that one because I really want to know how Bonifacius is going to react to his grandson acting this way. I imagine it won't be good for Traugott. Once we returned to the room for retainers in Lady Rosemine's chambers, Riarda left the rest to Ottilie as she hurriedly left to prepare for her family meeting. The speed at which she moved made me blink in surprise, and I only came back to reality when Ottilie finished preparing tea for us. Riarda may be reliable like no one else, but she accompanied a student to the Royal Academy at her advanced age and needs to clean up the terrible mess her grandson made. Her hands truly were full, Ottilie said, having apparently heard of what Traugott had done at the Academy. Lady Rosemine had pushed Traugott to resign for her own reasons, but his insubordination was severe enough that he could have easily been fired on the spot. The disrespect he showed toward her was especially infuriating to those of us who genuinely served as her retainers, and it besmirched the Archducal family's good name. Riarda was fully in the right for having exploded at him for not having the proper mindset of a servant. Cornelius nodded. Traugott is of an Archduke blood and does not have much to do with us Liesgang, so unlike you and me, he must not be happy at all about Rosemine's status. Traugott was Lord Bonifacius' grandson, but only through his second wife, who had been a Liesgang noble. Maybe due to that, Traugott had seen Cornelius as a rival ever since they were young. It was apparently a pain having to deal with his constant antagonisms. Still, that's not a good excuse to look down on the person you're serving. He always complained to people about Rosemine, and to be honest, I'm glad he's not her retainer anymore, Cornelius said. It was wretched enough that Riarda, his own grandmother, demanded that he be fired, Ottilie noted with a sigh. I did not see the incident firsthand, but he must have truly been acting terrible. She then gave both Cornelius and me a look of genuine concern. How has Hartmut been, might I ask? He is smitten with Lady Rosemine and can lose control a bit sometimes. No? I have not heard from him since I received an enthusiastic letter saying that he was picked to serve as one of her retainers. I am truly worried he might earn Lady Rosemine's disfavor in an entirely different fashion than Traugott. Cornelius and I reflexively exchanged looks. As Liesgang nobles, we too were worried about Hartmut's nonsense. It seems that Lady Rosemine is a bit taken aback by Hartmut's enthusiasm, but she did chastise him for how he handled information during the Traugott incident, and he seemed to have learned from his mistake, I said. I do not believe he will lose control in a way that displeases Lady Rosemine. Ottilie paused in thought for a moment before furrowing her brow. But he will still work in the shadows to further his own ends, do you think? She asked, having found no reassurance in my words. As his mother, she knew Hartmut well. Anyone else would surely have been fooled by his polite smile and attitude. Lenore, I do apologize for this, but could you keep an eye on him when you return to the Royal Academy? Yeah, Cornelius agreed. He won't stop talking about how Rosamund is best suited to become the next Ob. He hasn't given up on her taking the position at all. Even though she don't want it. And I'm sure Viarda has told them time and time again that she does not want that position, so to stop mentioning it. So Hartmut's still doing it. Having both Audley and Cornelius request my help with such serious expressions made me a little worried. It was certainly true that someone needed to keep an eye on him. Cornelius and me here at the castle, Brunhilde was the only retainer of a high enough status to restrain him, but she could not be trusted with such a duty. Given how many trends and inventions Lady Rosamund has introduced thus far, she too believed that Ehrenfest would prosper the most under her rule. Or progress the most under her rule. Okay, I'll remind Hartmut not to work in the shadows and oppose Lady Rosamund's will while she and you are gone, Cornelius. Thanks. I'm glad she took you on as a retainer, Lenore, he said with a grin. I could feel a smile touch my own lips as well. I had accepted this position not just because my father had said doing so was my duty as a Liesgang noble, but also because I wanted to be closer to Cornelius. It was an indecent motivation to have, but Cornelius had started taking his training and studying very seriously when Lady Rosamund began her long sleep. He had gone from doing only the bare minimum expected of an archnoble to working harder than anyone, and I was struck with the overwhelming desire to watch over his efforts forever. We don't have any guard work to do while Rosamund's away, so this is the perfect chance to train up the apprentices who don't know how to cooperate, Cornelius said. You saw how they worked from afar, and you know how to put what we learned in class into practice now. Could you train them in preparation for the introductory tournament? Cornelius was pinning his hopes on me, which made me want to work even harder. Maybe half of the analysis of the treasure-stealing dinner game had actually come from Lady Rosamund. She was only a first-year Archduke candidate, but she had seen right through the enemy's techniques and set up plans to beat them. I needed to do even better as a fourth year, actually taking the night course. You can count on me. I think I will follow Lord Ferdinand's dinner manual and start by grasping the apprentices' individual strengths. 346, 22 more pages. Cornelius and I spent the day discussing the training for the apprentice knights, and the next morning I returned to the Royal Academy. Oh my, Lenore, what happened at the council for you to return so early? Brunhilde asked, coming out of the common room. She gave me a composed smile, but she seemed clearly displeased about something. Lady Rosamund left for the temple right away, so Cornelius suggested that I stay in the Royal Academy until the dedication ritual is over, I replied, turning my gaze to Hartmut as he came out as well. He shrugged. Something had apparently happened in the common room. Oh, no. Brunhilde, Hartmut, do you have a moment? There's something I want to discuss, I said, pointing at my eyes. Brunhilde took a deep breath before giving a smile that lacked any of the displeasure that had been on her face a moment ago. Why, of course. Hartmut gestured to the side, and together we started walking toward the meeting room. As soon as the door shut behind us, Brunhilde narrowed her eyes, her eyebrows trembling in frustration. Absolutely infuriating, she exclaimed. As it turned out, she was mad at none other than Lord Wulfried. In an example of truly unfortunate timing, on the day Lady Rosamund had departed for the castle, a letter had arrived from Dunkelfelger's Lady Hannelore. It was an invitation to a tea party in which she explained that she was hoping to use this opportunity to foster new connections. While Lady Rosamund is no longer here, I assume you refused, of course. I know she is an Archduke candidate, but we have no other choice. They didn't challenge you to dinner when you sent our response, did they? No, nothing like that, Hartmut said with a grin and a dismissive hand wave. It was addressed to all our Archduke candidates, not just Lady Rosamund. So Lord Wulfried does not have a choice but to attend. The problem is that he went to Brunhilde. He looked toward Brunhilde, whose normally amber eyes were a little brighter than usual due to her wrath. He said this should have been a tea party for Lady Rosamund, and that he was therefore entrusting us with making the preparations for him. Can you believe the gall? I am not his servant. Proper procedure would have been for Lord Wulfried to consult Lady Rosamund via letter, and for her to subsequently instruct us to help him. The fact he had completely disregarded this and given us a direct order was unforgivable to Brunhilde. Please do calm down, Brunhilde. Recall that Lady Rosamund did indeed instruct us to assist Lord Wulfried in her absence, I said. This goes far beyond mere insistence. Lord Wulfried said his retainers do not have time for this since they have not yet finished their classes. I say clearing their schedules is their responsibility. Do you not agree? Brunhilde was completely in the right here. Our instructions were to work with Lord Wulfried's attendants, not to obey whatever orders we received, and do everything ourselves. Not to mention, it was hard to imagine his attendants simply not having time for this. We had arranged our class schedules around Lady Rosamund's library visits, so this was equivalent to them admitting they were useless and incompetent.
Or perhaps they were fine with that. Can you imagine how arrogant one must be to prioritize their retainer's schedules over everything else? And to give orders to the retainers of another and expect them to obey? That reminds me so much of the way Lady Veronica acted when I greeted her following my debut that I feel sick with disgust, Brunhilde said with palpable frustration. I do not know what happened following Brunhilde's debut, but I did recall both her and her father, Guy Groschel, being exceedingly displeased. My own father had even said, "I wonder how long this can keep going on," with a defeated dry smile. He must know how much Lady Veronica antagonized and abused the Liesgang nobles, but he's still acting exactly as he used to. Maybe he thinks he can keep ordering us around even now that Lady Veronica has been removed. He must not want to accept that things are no longer as they once were, Hartmut said with a dismissive scoff. Albeit not equally, as Liesgangs, the three of us all suffer from Lady Veronica's abuse. The fact that Lord Wolfried had been raised under her means we hadn't had a good impression of him from the start. Perhaps Lord Wolfried looks down upon Liesgang nobles due to his upbringing. I understand we should ideally recognize them as completely separate individuals, but they are simply too alike. Their hair and eyes, of course, but even their speech and actions, I commented. Brunhilde and Hartmut nodded. Back when the balance of power had shifted, Lord Wolfried immediately broke away from the former Veronica faction and started treating them how he had used to treat Liesgang nobles in the past. It was necessary to warn them not to approach Lady Rosemine, but still, it did not feel particularly pleasant to see the Archduke's son shut out those who had once supported him. How could one who did not respect his own faction respect nobles of another? I could not help but compare him with Lady Rosemine, who treated all factions equally even after having been attacked and put to sleep for 2 years. Had Lady Rosemine started treating members of the former Veronica faction with more disdain once she awoke, I would simply have considered her an average noble. But she had fairly appraised the work done by Roderick and the others. She maintained her position even in the face of complaints from Lord Wolfried, which had earned her my respect, and resulted in me considering her worthy of my service. I get why you're mad, Brunhilde, but we don't need to think of this as following orders from Lord Wolfried, Hartmut said. We need only use him for our own purposes. There's nothing wrong with promoting our trending products at a tea party between Archduke candidates held in Lady Rosemine's absence. Know what I mean? Yes, I know. I would never slack on my duties out of mere frustration. As Lady Rosemine's retainer, I will do my job with splendor and aplomb, Brunhilde said, her chest puffed out as though she had completely turned her anger into motivation. She had all the dignity of one raised to succeed Guy Groschel. Not to mention, this tea party is the perfect opportunity to give Liesletta and Feline some practice. I want them both to get as much experience as possible before Lady Rosemine's tea parties. Failing her is unforgivable, but failing Lord Wolfried is merely a source of amusement. It was a very Hartmut thing to say, but no matter how irritating Lord Wolfried might have been, he was still an Archduke candidate. Brunhilde scrunched up her face. I would not put it that way myself, but I do agree generally speaking. Ehrenfest has not had much opportunity to have tea parties with higher-ranking duchies. Considering that Lady Rosemine has developed a personal relationship with royalty in a matter of weeks, we need more practice ourselves. Would a tea party with a higher-ranking duchy truly serve as good practice? It was hard not to imagine Feline, a lay noble, becoming teary-eyed with fear and anxiety. Given that she was Lady Rosemine's retainer, however, she had no choice but to grow used to it. Still, though, a tea party with Dunkelfelger, To think we received an invitation from the same duchy that had ganged up with other duchies to ambush us the day we took Schwartz and Weiss from the library, I murmured with concern. Hartmut instantly shook his head. Actually, I looked into this, Hartmut said. Turns out that Dunkelfelger has nothing but high praise for the young-looking Ehrenfest Archduke candidate who dominated their nights with clever plans. Lady Hannelore, Lord Lestelot's little sister, actually wants to apologize for her brother's rude behavior. I suppose that must be the case if you are saying it with such confidence. I still remember how Hartmut had endlessly needled Cornelius during Lady Rosemine's long sleep about the kidnapping being her guard knight's fault. It was hard to imagine him allowing her to be put in any danger whatsoever. He had certainly thoroughly investigated Dunkelfelger before even thinking about letting this happen. I imagine she sent the invitation addressed to all candidates because she has not yet met Lady Rosemine herself, but... Wait, is Lady Hannelore not a first-year Archduke candidate? Surely they would have met each other in class by now, Brunhilde said. Recall that Lady Rosemine has, for the most part, only ever spoken about her professors, rarely her classmates, I said. She was surely so focused on passing that she did not socialize with the other duchies whatsoever. Yep, that's Rosemine for you. Brunhilde and I exchanged glances. Lady Rosemine was skilled in many areas, but she was exceedingly particular in where she drew her motivation from. Perhaps it would be wise to warn her of the potential fallout. It was highly important to deepen one's bonds in the Royal Academy. In particular, it was essential that female Archduke candidates search for marriage partners and form diplomatic relationships that would prove useful even after they went into other duchies. Lady Rosamund was simply unwell this term. Next year she will surely Brunhilde. Denying reality will change nothing. There is no future in which Lady Rosamund does not attempt to hide away in the library next year as well. It is better to lose hope now than to cling to it for as much longer than is reasonable, I said with a small smile. Forcing Lady Rosamund to leave her books to socialize was no doubt going to be one of our most significant duties as her retainers. Following my return, life at the Royal Academy was not completely smooth. Despite Lady Rosamund's absence, nobles from other duchies were continually requesting information on hairpins and Rensham. While it was perfectly acceptable for us to refuse these, Lord Wilfrid was obstinately accepting them all and forcing Brunhilde to handle the necessary preparations, as saying that we cannot refuse invitations from higher-ranking duchies. To make matters worse, even with Brunhilde doing all the work, Lord Wilfrid would often complain about how exhausting it was to attend tea parties with so many women. Her wrath was nearing boiling point, and Oswald was casually ignoring her politely worded protests. Riarda would absolutely have scolded him for his incompetence had she been here, but at the moment he was the highest in status among all adult attendants staying in the Ehrenfest dormitory. I continued to listen to Brunhilde's complaining on the side as I started training the apprentice knights in preparation for the upcoming interduchy tournament, as agreed with Cornelius. I glanced over the dinner manual we had received from Lord Ferdinand and decided to begin by gathering information on Ehrenfest apprentice knights. It was important to know in great detail their strengths, weaknesses, how much stamina they had, how mana capacity, since dinner involved a set number of players. Lenore, how long are you going to make us run? Traugott exclaimed. Shut up. Did I not say until you run out of stamina? You still seem to have some left in you, Traugott. Your stamina is splendid. Lenore, I can't take much more. My mana is drying up. Alexis, you have enough mana for 2 more shots, no? Your accuracy always plummets when you're mana deprived, and that is something I need to work on. I had the apprentices train until they reached their limits, and then record my findings. Plant paper was thin enough that I could stack several sheets on top of each other, which made this work much more easier to complete. I gave them my silent praise, trying to record all this information on wooden boards would have required a disastrous mountain of wood. Dare I say it, but I have gathered some excellent information here. The bulk of the apprentices were sprawled out on the hills of the training grounds like fish on a riverbed. Their dead stillness, aside from the occasional twitch, made the comparison even more appropriate. They were fine, though. The rejuvenation potions just needed some time to kick in. Hopefully we do not run out. Lenore, I'm finally finished on my classes too. Please let me join in the training, Judith cried, rushing onto the grounds with a broad smile. Her hair was as fluffy and as bouncy as ever. Hello there, Judith. You came in a perfect time. No, you don't understand. You're still a second year, aren't you? Run! Run while you still have the Rudolph, I see you have recovered. Perhaps you should run to the limits of your stamina once again, this time with Judith observing also. Actually, ma'am, I'm not yet recovered yet. Then be silent and say no more. Now, Judith, shall we begin? What? I silenced Rudolph's attempted interference and firmly gripped Judith's cape. She was panicking now that she finally noticed the knights scattered around like corpses, but it was too late. There was no escape. She had shown excellent accuracy during our game of treasure-stealing dinner earlier. Her participation in the interduchy tournament would only begin after she started the night course next year, but her ranged skills would dramatically expand the range of strategies at our disposal. It was quite the exciting prospect. I am so moved that you would ask to participate in training early. Once I have measured your stamina, we can begin to examine your ranged abilities. It did not take long before Judith was sprawled at my feet in exhaustion like everyone else. It was unbecoming of a noble woman to lay upon the ground, but nobody here cared to mention that. Everyone was in the same boat. I should have listened to Lord Rudolph. Why didn't I listen? I can't believe the training in the Royal Academy is so harsh. Oh my, I heard you were training in Klausenberg, but even so that is some surprising stamina. You have already recovered enough to speak. Not yet. I can't speak at all. I'm so weak. Judith tried, her voice brimming with vigor, as she frantically shook her head with teary eyes. She truly did recover quickly. She was a perfect candidate to become a knight. Perhaps you should receive Lord Bonifacio's training just as Angelica had, benefiting and suffering all because of the love he held for his granddaughter. Once everyone has recovered, we will move on to repeatedly casting attacks of the same strength to using the same amount of mana. What will you do in the meantime, Lenore? Judith asked. I will return to the dormitory while you are resting to bring some rejuvenation potions. It does not seem we have quite enough. I exited the training grounds just as the apprentices began to shriek, "Wait, there's going to be more?" Professor Roffin was standing by the exit, presumably having been watching for some time. "Seems like you Ehrenfest lot are putting all you've got into your practice," he said with a laugh. "I thought you might be resting on your laurels, all cocky like after beating us, but it seems like I was wrong. Good, good." "There are some arrogant apprentices among us, in truth. Lady Rosemont said during the game of dinner that it would be better for us to lose, in accordance with our weaknesses, and now I understand why she said that. If only the others all understood as well," I said, looking back to the training ground. Professor Roffin gave a confused look. "Oh? Lady Rosemont said that? Seriously, who in the world is she really? What kind of Archduke candidate acts like that?" I wondered the same thing. Lady Rosemont had studied the written lessons of the night course to tutor Angelica, and Cornelius had mentioned to me that she had read the book on strategizing that the Knight Commander had in his estate. I also knew she had accompanied the Knight's Order on extermination missions as a Temple Shrine Maiden in the past, which had given her an opportunity to see the adult Knights fight properly. But was that truly enough to give her such competent orders? I too studied the Knight course, and yet it had not occurred to me that my written lessons needed to be connected to real-world examples before Lady Rosemont pointed it out to me. And even then I was unable to come up with strategies as unique as hers. Perhaps I would have deduced their moves in retrospect and come up with counter-strategies, but in the moment I would simply have fallen for their plots and gone into a panic. I could not fathom how Lady Rosemont did it. It was not normal. In order for Ehrenfest to move on to the next stage of strength, it was necessary for all our apprentice knights to face their limits. I was having them train to their limits for the purpose of gathering information, but what truly mattered was learning how much they could do in actual games. I wanted to know roughly what percentage of their strength is practice they could maintain when it really counted. Furthermore, unlike when we had narrowly won due to Lady Rosemont's unusual strategies, our next match would make our opponent's superior strength abundantly clear. In other words, you want a rematch, Roffin said. Currently, I'm sensing that I wanted Ehrenfest's apprentice knights to fight Dunkelfelger again for their own sake. I wish for them to become conscious of their true strength as soon as possible. However, to Dunkelfelger, I suppose a challenge from Ehrenfest without Lady Rosemont is nothing but a troublesome waste of time. Nah, I'm a professor. I need to do what I can to help my students get stronger. Not to mention, Dunkelfelger's knights want a rematch with Ehrenfest too. This might be a good opportunity to show them just how much of an impact a single tactician can have, he explained. It seemed that even in the powerhouse duchy, Dunkelfelger, there were some apprentice knights who cared more about individual strength than coordination and strategizing. Well, I will be returning to Ehrenfest in 3 days, so I shall leave the details to you. You're planning to push everything on me? You seem like you could be a pretty good tactician yourself one day. It is my hope to learn from the honorable examples set by Lady Rosemont and Lord Ferdinand. There is still much for me to improve upon, but I shall do my best. Roffin raised a surprised eyebrow before guffawing in amusement. After that, he took over the basic training for me. On the day before I departed for Ehrenfest, Lord Wolfrid gathered all the apprentice knights in the common room. Professor Roffin requested a dinner rematch against Dunkelfelger, he said. The stunned announcement sent a stir through the apprentice knights. I pretended to be shocked along with them, putting up a hand to request permission to speak. Our overall strength is significantly lower with Angelica and Cornelius in Ehrenfest. Furthermore, we have no clever strategies to surprise Dunkelfelger like last time. It is hard to imagine us beating them as we are, I said. Lord Wolfrid grimaced. Are you saying I should refuse? This is a request from a greater duchy. Refusing isn't an option. Naturally, I understand that refusing is not an option, but winning will surely be impossible, I said, looking over everyone whilst nodding. Traugott shot me a defiant glare. No, Lenore, this is the perfect chance to show our power. We trained so much we have to be even stronger than before. Not to mention we already won one, or another apprentice added. We may lose this time, but at the very least we put up a good fight. All the knights had done was basic training to learn their limits, but that alone was apparently enough to convince them they were now stronger than Dunkelfelger. Oh, they're going to get their butts kicked. They're going to get their butts kicked if they do this. A single victory had given them undue confidence as expected. They needed to experience an utter crushing defeat. Hearing the motivated words of the apprentice knight, Lord Wolfrid gave a satisfied nod. Lenore, talk things over with Alexis and the others, then set a date for the match. Now I truly understand Brunhilde's anger. It was significantly frustrating to hear Lord Wolfrid give me orders as though it were his right, but I swallowed it down and gave a calm smile. Unfortunately, I am set to return to Ehrenfest tomorrow. Our previous game ended with Lady Rosemont's guard knights playing the key roles, so perhaps this time you can plan things around your guard knights. My intention was for the game to take place while I was absent so that I wouldn't have all the tedious work forced onto me, a la Brunhilde, so the challenge from Professor Roffin had to come at just the right moment. I will need to take this information I've gathered and plan out training regiments and strategies for the introductory tournament with Cornelius. With plans in mind for what to do now, I return to Ehrenfest. Once I returned to Airfest, I stepped on the teleporter circle.
Afterward. Let's see. Ladies, time to eat. And she's stuck in a book. She's stuck in a book. What if due to Lady Rosamund's influence, everyone changed their high beaks to shoe mills? Oh, she would love that. She would love that. Look at all the shoe mills. Pwee, pwee. So cute. They would all die of happiness. It seems Lesletta is in her own little world. Let's leave her be. You don't want to get rid of that happiness. Okay, he's familiar. Ferdinand locked himself away in the workshop again. Please do something. Okay, but I really don't want to get yelled at again. I have a few tricks up my sleeve. Hey, Ferdinand. Professor Herscher told me some old stories about you. Do you mind me telling everyone? No. I got him. That got him. That got him. That got him. Actually, that should have been her tactic. Okay, an ordinance from Prince Anastasius has arrived. This song is truly amazing. She I did very well. This is all him. This is all him gushing about her. I have to hear this 3 times. What's this feeling of deja vu? I love Karina. Oh, that's why. Oh yeah, I know someone else like that. Listen to the prince's message, Lady Rosemine. I love Aquitaine. That's all he's saying. Essentially, he's singing praises of her. Anyway, I will see you guys next time.